Hey, this is Larry Yeager at Yeager Cycle, and I thought maybe I would show you a couple little tips on lubrication of the chain on a Pan America and adjustment on the chain of Pan America. We've got a lot of Harley-Davidson owners buying this type motorcycle, chain drive. Some of them have never had chain drive. So there's just a couple little tips. It's nothing real scientific, pretty easy to do. But so as far as lubrication, what I try to do, and I got a chunk of chain here for you, it's the easiest way to do it, is I take the chain lube, the aerosol chain lube that has the spray straw on it, and I try to apply the chain right down between the plates, right down through there, because that's where you want it. So we applied lubrication down through there, we apply lubrication down through there. I typically do it on the top of the chain and the bottom of the chain. And the reason you want to put it between the plates is that's how it penetrates down into the bushing of the chain. And that's where it needs the lubrication. Try to concentrate on that. I mean, you can coat the chain, makes no difference really. It just is a rust deterrent. But other than that, you know, that's where you need to apply it. Now, and I typically will lubricate mine after I wash it each time. You know, it's just a good time to do it. Another tip on that too is to lubricate it, let it set overnight. If you just lubricate this chain, jump on it and go for a ride, it's gonna do nothing but sling the oil off. So what I try to do is lubricate it, let it set all night long. It will penetrate the chain better and do its job better, okay? So there's a couple little tips on lubrication. As far as lubrication, you know, man, I think you could use about anything. There's hundreds of different chain lubes out there. I would just try to use a motorcycle type chain lube. This PJ1 Black Label is common for us. We use it in a lot of stuff. Maxima sells one that's called the chain wax, and it's kind of nice because it dries more like a grease and it's clear, so it maybe doesn't dirty up quite as bad. But I don't think there's a right or wrong on lubrication. Just use the right lubrication and make sure it's a chain lubrication. Another thing you might check into is that it's O-ring acceptable. Most chain lubes are, but make sure it's O-ring acceptable because these are an O-ring chain. Now, as far as adjustment and checking adjustment, you read your owner's manual, it will tell you in there, basically you have two adjustments, on the side stand or on the center stand. On the center stand, if I remember correctly, the adjustment is 1 3/4 inch to 2 1/4 inch, okay? So what they recommend for you to do is to find somewhere in the center between the front sprocket and the rear sprocket. So we're gonna say right here. And what I did on mine, it worked pretty well, is I just took a tape measure, put it up against the swing arm in a flat spot, and just simply measured from the center of the pin, so we're at about 4.5 inches, and we come up to 2 3/4. So we're about, what is that, 1 3/4 inches, about where we're at, thereabouts.
So that's the tolerable range.
That's the tolerable range, and actually I guess we're right at 2 inches because we go from 4 3/4 to 2 3/4, and that's the tolerable range. That's exactly correct, and that's an easy way to do it. If I remember correctly, if you're on the side stand, it's a 1/4 inch less range.
Sure.
Okay, because basically as this rear swing arm comes up, it makes the chain tighter. So that's why they have the two different adjustments. So that's how you check your chain adjustment. I put 600 miles on this thing. It was about a 1/4 inch off, so I adjusted a little bit. Once these O-ring chains get seated in, there's very little adjustment required. They last for a lot of years if they're cleaned well and they're lubricated well. And then as far as adjustment, it's pretty easy, pretty simple. The right-hand side of the axle, on the rear axle, is a 36 millimeter nut. So you take yourself a crescent wrench or a 36 millimeter wrench, loosen that nut up. You don't even have to take this safety clip off the end, this E-clip. Take that off. These adjusters here are 13 millimeter adjusters, and you basically you turn it clockwise to pull the axle back to tighten the chain up. And for instance, I turned each one of them a half a turn to soak up a 1/4 inch of chain slap. So it doesn't take much. Another thing that's critical on chain adjustment is doing it equal on each side, okay? Because you don't want to get the axle in there crooked. So There's different ways you can do it. You can get real scientific about it, or you can just, just make sure that you turn each nut equal amount. But you can measure the amount of stud sticking out of the back of the nut. You can measure that on both sides to make sure they're equal. You could measure from the back of the axle to the back of the swing arm. There's different ways you can do it. Just make sure you do it the same on both sides and make sure it's relatively straight. So really, in my opinion, that's about what's required on chain checking, adjustment, lubrication on the Pan Am. There's much more you can do, but in my experience through the years, that'll make that chain live a long time. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.